Welcome, everyone. My name is James Serra. I am going to present today for the next 45 minutes about Synapse database templates. Quick bio of me. I've been doing this quite a long time. I think I'm actually coming up on 40 years now. And I've been working at Microsoft for most of the last 9 years. I have mostly worked in pre-sales where I help to educate customers on architectures, particular products. A lot of it is confusing to customers, and I'm working in Microsoft Federal division now, so a lot of agencies as opposed to commercial, and a lot of people are confused on which of its products and then features within those products. And in particular, this one today is about the templates in there and what those are within Synapse. And to jump into it, this is a problem I see with a lot of customers, that they have a lot of applications out there. Each of these applications have their own data model behind the scenes, and they're usually very completely different on there. And they want to join all this data together. So it could be data from IoT devices to social media to homegrown applications that are dealing with customers or advertising. And the challenge is to bring all this together in a way that makes it easy for end users to query that data, do reports off that data when they're coming from all these different data models on there. So what you want to do is build a unified data model. So all these systems that have the data that you want to bring together need a data model that will handle all of this data. And this is where you have a choice. Do I want to go and build this data model on my own, or do I want to go and use a common data model that someone else has built? And in almost every case, you want to use a common data model, and that's what Synapse database templates are. So the idea is I create this one model, and then instead of on the left where I have all these applications and I'm trying to write queries that are going against all these different data models, is extremely challenging. I have this one common data model that's created from all those other data models, and I now have this unified source that every application that wants to use it, or any end user that wants to use it, just has one model to go to. So it is something that on your own could take months to do, or right out of the box, you'll see with the database templates, they're already done for you, and they're tried and true and tested, and they've been used for many years on there. So it also reduces the risk on that, and we'll get into more of that in a minute. And feel free, if you have any questions, just to drop them in the chat box, or even come off mute if you want. Raise your hand. I could pause to answer your questions. So when we look at the idea of what is this, how is this going to help me? Give me more details. First off, if you're trying to modernize to the cloud, if you have an on-prem system, this is a shortcut process to pulling your data into the cloud using this common data model. Because these data models have been around for quite a long time, and with Microsoft, they had purchased a previous company called ADRM that have had these models for 30 years. So it's also greatly reducing the risk. Meaning, if I build my model on my own, I may get a few months into it and realize, oh, I made some mistakes in this model, or I forgot something on here. Since he's been around and used by thousands of customers in there, that risk goes away. You also create a common language for everyone to use. So you standardize on this model, which has its own language in there. So that means every department is speaking the same language and not having different names for similar concepts or fields or tables in there. It allows for much better integration by having all of this in a data lake. And we'll talk more about this, but this common data model is in a data lake, which has, if you get into the data lakehouse approach, and if you are aware of Microsoft's new product that's been talked about today, Microsoft Fabric, it's all about doing everything in the data lake. And the common data models, these database templates, are using a data lake. And this also makes it easier for ISVs, third-party product partners and products to create products on top of these templates, because the templates are known, everybody's using them. So if I want to go and build a solution on top of that, I now know all the data fields that people are using. So I can much more easily build a solution on top of that is available then to anybody using these database templates. And you'll see that these data models, they're extensible and customizable, meaning you can go in there and you can start off using this model, and you could decide some parts of the model I don't want to use, and then there are other parts that I need to expand on. So you can add your own fields and other tables within these models. So it's not you're locked into that. They can be customized. And the bottom line is this makes it faster to build solutions on here, because you're taking what could take many months to build this data model. Now you can learn that data model in a matter of a few weeks, and whatever system solution you're building now, you're just going to have it done that much quicker. So the benefits I said are applied to any common data model that you want to purchase in there. Now, specifically, when you look about the database templates within Synapse, what are the benefits of that? It's that it's integrated within Synapse, so that gives you a big benefit if you are using Synapse to build your solution in there. It's all integrated, and you'll see in the demo. There are models, I think that actually there's 24, I think now. So again, saving you hundreds of hours between creating your own model in there. There is the interface you'll see within this during the demo. It's no code, low code in there. So you can do almost everything you need to without having to write any lines of code. The process to load the data into the model is made a lot easier. It's a visual interface, as you'll see in the demo. Once the data is in Synapse and in this data lake, then it's real easy for anyone using Power BI to connect to that data and start using it. They can also query data with Synapse, the serverless piece. They can query it with Spark. They can even query it outside of Synapse if they wanted to, if that product understands the common data model. And then it makes it easy for machine learning development, because if I want to create a machine learning model and I need to train it, I now know the data layout, and I can build a model on top of that. And then that can apply to anybody using this model now, because it was trained using that particular common data model in there. Some definitions, because one thing Microsoft is good at is using names that are confusing and renaming things. And the database templates are, think of it as models by industry models on that. You can also call them the common data model. They don't use the term common data model because it gets confusing if you're using Dynamics, which has its own common data models, which are different than this. So not the same thing. And so to avoid confusion, which it may have caused more, is they call these database templates and not common data model. But think of them as just industry data models. So you'll see in the demo that there's database templates. These are all by industry. And then there's a designer that's used to take those templates and customize them and then to load data with them. As I mentioned, this was from ADRM. So there's, I think, 25 models now, and more are coming. And every month or two, they added additional models on that. So there's still a lot more to go with these common data models by industry in there. So if you're in the industry and you don't see it yet, hopefully it'll be out soon. And I always say to think about a common data model, if there's this metadata layer on top of the data, it's a virtual data layer on there. So it's making it easier to understand that data by having this virtual layer on there. And that virtual layer, as you'll see, can be pretty complex with some of these common data models in there. But you're accessing that metadata and that's giving you access to the data below it. The database templates are just one piece of a lot of other options within Synapse Studio on here. And they're integrated very well. You can use any type of product on top of that within Synapse, meaning if I want to use SQL or Spark, I can use them on top of the database templates on there. They're huge. So there's, as you see in the top right, there's 5,000 entities, which are essentially tables, 30,000 attributes or fields on that. And so it can be challenging to learn what these templates are. I'm not going to lie about that. There's so many that there's so many entities within each of them. It could be a while, take a few weeks to ramp up and understand them all. And the hardest part will be most time consuming is mapping the data you have from your sources into these templates on there. But they're robust, so they put everything in there, and you're not going to need to use all of the data model on that. So you just need to learn which pieces you want, and then the others you can just ignore. And again, you can customize it if need be. So these are the templates. They just added a few others on here, like airlines. So and so understand you don't need to match exactly these industries in order to use them. So maybe your industry is sort of like retail, but not totally. Well, that's fine. Go look at the retail template. That may fit all your needs on there. So we've got a lot of customers who are in some industry that's not well known, but they find one of these templates that pretty much contain everything they need. If not, they can customize it a bit. But you don't have to match 100% with what's on here in order to get a lot of value out of these. Now, each of the templates has what's called business areas on here. So this is where you can say, well, I'm not in retail, but you know what? In an industry that has contracts and budgets and products. And so find a industry template that has one of those all those business areas on there. And each template has almost up to 30 business areas on there. And there's a lot of repetitiveness. So for example, you may say the customer business area, that's in a lot of templates. So if you learn it in one, it applies to all the others on there. So as you'll see in the demo, how they're broken out by these business areas, which are kind of like tables. And then there's the entities or fields within them. So when we look at it at a high level, this is the flow of using these templates on here. You'll have this template designer where you're going to view the models and choose the one that's most appropriate. These are in third normal form. So you're going to visually pick these templates and customize it as needed. And in the end, you'll have this customized model that's in third normal form that is landing in Data Lake Store Gen 2. It could either be in CSV Parquet or in preview is Delta format. And I would suggest Delta format because that's where Microsoft is standardizing and everything, especially within Fabric. And so all of this is stored in this data lake, which is just storage. On top of that, you have various compute you can use, as I touched on. So I can use Synapse. I can even go into Databricks and use Databricks Spark to interface with that because there are APIs made available to access all this data that's sitting in the data lake. And then on top of that, you can have any business applications that can go and access the data in the common data models and the templates on there. And that's the whole idea is I land all this data in the common data model from all these source systems. It's like you're building a data warehouse. And then once it's in there, all of these other applications can then access it much easier than if they had to go access all the data models individually in the first few slides on here. So you're creating a data warehouse, but you're simplifying the process by having these pre-built common data models on there. Then what you'll do in step L3 on here is once I have those common data model customized and the way I want it, is then I start loading the data in there. And that data can be loaded again through Databricks or the visual flows, which I'll show in the demo. And then it's going to land in that data lake. And from there, I can decide to go one step further and take that large model in third normal form and create things like a star schema. I can do that within Synapse, or I can use Power BI for that and create a data set on there. Or I can copy this data into a dedicated pool, and that would be my star schema that's going to access it. So this gets into approaches for pulling out that data once it's landed in there. Do I want to use that third normal form? Do I want to copy it into a star schema? Do I want to have that star schema in a data lake? Do I want to have that star schema in Power BI? Lots of options. This will have a lot of discussion with customers. It's going to come down to ease of use. Maybe a customer end user is used to a relational database in a star schema and they want dedicated pools. Maybe they're fine with something in a data set in Power BI. If they're using Power BI, maybe they need to go to star schema for performance reasons. So a lot of decision points on that. A couple other things before I get into the demo. This is what you would do to map the data. So there is a map data button on here. And in there, you're going to say, okay, what's your source? So it could be some SQL server on-prem. It could be SQL database. Lots of options to choose from there. And then you're going to say, okay, here's my source. What is my destination, which is the common data model. And the most time consuming is this mapping of that. So I'm going to have, and this is where a lot of times customers will do all of this outside of the Synapse in there. They'll get an Excel spreadsheet and they'll just say, this is the fields in the common data model. Here's the fields from the source system. Let me spend some time trying to map them together. And the mapping is not just the direct, but it can also be where I want to say, well, maybe I want to aggregate all this data and land it in the field. Maybe I want to get the max and or min. So there's sophistication in this visual tool to map the data, and you can see them all here. There's about a dozen of them that can do more than just a direct mapping on that. So it's kind of shortcutting the process, automating it in a way, all through this map data tool. Now, this map data tool, once you go and set all this up behind the scenes, what it does is it creates a data flow. It's going to look like this. So it's a wizard on top of the database templates that does all the mapping for you, that creates a data flow. Now you can decide to create your data flow on your own without using the wizard, but I would suggest try to use the wizard and it'll probably handle almost all your use cases on that and build this out for you. Now you can also say, well, I love Spark. I want to use that for mapping. Fine, you can go into Spark Notebook and then access your source system using whatever language you want. In this case, could be Python, and then write it to your common data model, your database templates on there. So all three options are available to you. I also want to point out that there is, out of the box, a sample, or we can actually use this in production, AI solutions. Again, because you know the layout of the common data model, I can build a ML model to train off of that, and then anybody can use it as using that common data model. So this one is more of an example in there where it was built using the retail industry. And then there's a lot of Microsoft partners who've built machine learning models on top of some of these industries, and therefore you can use those right out of the box. An example of a template is consumer goods. Now, here's the challenge. They're quite large. You see there's over 4,000 entities or tables or within this. So this is the business categories you see here. And then each of those can have, for example, the accounting has 77 entities within it. So it's this business area called accounting with 77 entities or tables within it. And so that's where I find customers struggle the most, is understanding all of this out of the box in there. And it can take a little bit of time to figure all this out. Now, also, sometimes these templates get updated. So when consumer goods came out, they called it model 0.1, and now it's up to 1.1, and they've added almost 300 more entities to it. Fortunately, they document the changes on here. It'd be a side conversation of how you upgrade, but these models are continually getting updated and getting improved upon, with the challenges that are quite large. So with that, I'm going to jump into the demo. If anybody has any questions, just raise your hand. So when we look at how this works, so this is nothing more than going into the Azure portal, going to Synapse. You create a Synapse workspace, and this is a feature within the workspace. So here I'm already in the workspace. And what you'll find under data here is this is where I can choose on that plus sign under data, you'll have this gallery. And if I click on this gallery, there's database templates you'll see up here. And I choose that as the starting point, and there's all the database templates. And so I can pick anyone out that matches my industry or is close to it. So we'll go with retail, and what you'll find is it loads all the tables in there, and it comes up on the right-hand side with a preview with a default set of tables on here. So if I zoom this out, you'll see there's only about 10 of the tables on here. So that's a starting point. And you'll now add more tables to it depending on your needs on there. So you can see they have the relationships defined on here. And if you click on any one of these tables, you'll see that they have information about it. So this is a way to learn about it. Now, unfortunately, there's not I wish they had say a Word document that explained all of these, but they don't have anything like that. So you have to go into each table or entity and click on it and see description, and then the columns on here has the description of what they are, and then the relationships are defined. So what you'll do on this left-hand side is go into these business categories, look through accounting, and then you'll say, well, yeah, actually I need the auditor, an auditor report. And it starts adding these to that model on the right-hand side in there. And it puts the relationships because it already knows them in here. So you're going to go through and figure out all the ones that you want. Yes, I know it's challenging. Oh, look, they're actually on the retail recently upgraded from another version here. And so this is where you go through and figure out what you need. A product, look at that, it's 540 of the tables in there. So I know that's could be confusing, and it's a trade-off. Like, well, I want to make these models really robust and have everything you ever need. The trade-off on that is a lot to go and figure out and understand in here. But I can guarantee you anything you'd ever need is in these, and these models are almost 30 years old. So the relationships and everything on here are well defined, and they make a lot of sense once you figure it all out. So in the end, you're going to set all this up, and then you're going to go and create the database on here. Now, they call it a database. In actuality, it's tables within a data lake on there. So, and if I look at any one of these, well, let me close this. And I've created one previously here. This was for our agriculture. And so once I do a create database, it just goes out. It's pretty quick. It could take under a minute. And in this example, I had 8 or so tables or entities that were created on here. And here on the right-hand side, you can see the model that I created. And then what I can do here is I can customize it too. So if I come in here, and you'll see under columns, I have the ability to I can rename these columns if I want. I could add additional columns on here. I could delete some of the columns. And so this is where you get into the customization piece of it. I can also, and if you go in here and you click new column in here, it's just a matter of entering the source and the destination, or in this case, we're just doing the destination of what you're going to call it all. And then data type things on there. You can put in some of the format on that. So all visual interface you can do. And then the same relationships. I can come in here and add relationships and define those between all the different tables in there. Okay, so and then the other thing to point out on when you look at these tables on here is underneath the covers, this is all, I'm sorry, on the properties, this is underneath the covers. You can choose here what format you want in there. And there's limited text parquet, and if there's in public preview is Delta. You have to add a switch to your URL, and you'll be able to see that. And so that is will be an option that I recommend to use on there. And then it talk about where is this going to land. This is just a folder inside of your data lake where you're going to put all this. And then you can publish this out. This could be connected. I don't have it in here, a code repository where it versions everything on here. And so now when I go through this, I create the common data model. This is the destination for all the sources. And then next step would be, once I define this model, is okay, now I need to map the data. And that's what I showed you before on the screenshots in the deck, is the map data piece on here. So I come in here and I just say, well, where's my source system? Maybe it's data sitting in data lake storage on here. I've previously defined these connections to it. I can say, yeah, I've limited text sitting out there, and I'm going to choose this folder, and inside this folder is some files, and this is what I want to use to map on here. And then it's going to say, give me a mapping name. And then it comes up with the mapping wizard is the way to think of that, where I just go through and I start matching up. And again, that's going to be the longest part, is to figure all that out. So a lot of customers, they go through that Excel spreadsheet, they map it all out, and then I jump in this tool and they do the mapping here. Now, some of the source systems could be a lot of customers using it. Maybe you're looking at Salesforce on that. So I wish I could say there's built-in Salesforce mapping in here, but there's not. However, a lot of partners have done the work. So sometimes you reach out to partners and you're using Salesforce, they already have the mapping done for you. So it makes it a lot easier. Then you come in here and you say, okay, this is the particular target. These are entities or tables. Here's the source columns, mapping to the target. Here's the mapping method as I showed you on here. So this is that wizard. You go through it all. Once you finish all this, if you go back out to the data under develop, you will, oh, I don't have one there. So you will see that data flow that was created on that, which I showed you in that before. It'll look like something like this. Then you can go and customize it more if you need to. But the wizard, at the very least, will give you a great starting point for shortcutting the process to building this out. So once you get all that done, you go in there and you set up a schedule, and it's your basic ETL. It's copying from the source to the destination, and then of course you want to set up proper governance and auditing and all those things. Separate topic on there, but the idea is, wow, hopefully you'll go in here and you'll say, man, this could have took me forever to create this data model. And what I typically see with customers is, if they do it on their own, they spend weeks, months creating a data model. They start going through this mapping, and then they realize, oh, wait a minute, we forgot a particular table to create in here. Or even worse, they define relationships incorrect, and then they got to go back and redo things and reload everything. And it's just very time consuming. That's why I say use this Synapse data model, the database templates on there, and you're really going to make building your solution a lot quicker. So that's a lot. That's not a lot to know to start using these in there. I pretty much went through it all on that. Again, the hard part will be learning each of these models. All right, any questions? If you want to raise your hand, come off mute while I rest my voice for a second. Usually at this point, somebody gets a question like, well, is this going to be in Fabric, Microsoft's new product that they've announced that many people are doing sessions today on? Honestly, don't know yet when that's going to happen. I'm fairly confident it will happen in not too long term in there, but I don't have any details yet from the product group of when this is going to be in there. So they're trying to get Fabric out the door, and once they do that post GA, hopefully they'll start integration of this inside of Fabric on that, but nothing yet. Okay, jumping back to the deck here, a couple other things to point out. There's, just like with any solution that you're building, a lot of it's the people in the process. And here on this slide is what I typically see customers have when it comes to the roles and responsibilities on there. Things like they'll have a product owner and a data owner and a modeler. And this is something to think through before you start jumping into building a data model. Whether you're using the database templates or not, it's important to define these roles and responsibilities, which can be shared. So this doesn't mean you have to have one person for each of these. A lot of times you may see the data owner and data modeler being the same person on here. But think through all this. Maybe you set up a center of excellence, you come up with a nice project plan, and you go through the roles and responsibilities, which could be a little bit different depending on your use case in your company. And then you start staffing it and you start building it in there. What I find a lot of separation is the modelers from the engineers. So somebody will come in here and they'll go through the templates, they'll create the model, and then they'll also go into Excel and create the mapping, and then they will hand that over to an engineer who will then go into the tool. And the mapping is already done from them by the modelers, but they need to go and do the mapping. Now, this is where sometimes the modelers, because this wizard is so easy, they will do the mapping. Other times they will leave it to the engineer who may go and jump in and do Spark for the mapping on that. So that's definitely where we see the true separation of the two. So smaller companies, that modeler may do everything on that, but a lot of times in the bigger companies, because there's a lot of sources to pull in there, they'll have that separation. Now, I also wanted to point out some of the decision points if you're using Power BI and Synapse with this. I'll get a question like, well, if I have this industry model, can I just connect Power BI to it directly and generate dashboards and reports off that? And I will say yes, but a big caveat is that the industry model is pretty small, and I'm just using a number here, 25 tables. Because that's third normal form, it can be fine if you have under 25 tables. If you started getting more and more tables, hundreds, potentially thousands, you don't want to keep it in third normal form. You want to create a star schema from it. And the star schema is nothing more than denormalizing a table and making it smaller on that. So instead of maybe 200 tables in there, I can create a star schema that combines all this data and makes it down to maybe 20 tables in there, which is much easier for an end user to start consuming that data when they're generating the reports and the dashboards on there. Again, there's not anything out of the box that automatically converts it to a third normal to a star schema. And when I asked the product group, well, why didn't you just do that? And they said the challenge, which makes a lot of sense, is, well, what tables do I use to create a star schema? I don't want to say, well, I got 4,000 tables, I'm going to create one huge giant star schema on that. So I have to break it up into smaller ones. But then the problem is so many customers are using different pieces of that. What they could build out is probably not likely going to fit on that. However, use partners who may have done that, and at the very least, they don't have something exact that matches. They can still shortcut the process in there. So then it gets into, okay, I'm going to create this star schema. Where do I store the data for the star schema? So I have third normal form data. I need to copy it into a star schema. If you're familiar with the medallion architecture in the data lake, you have bronze, silver, gold. I could take the data that could be in the common data model in the silver zone, and then I can copy it into a gold zone in star schema. And I want to do that if I'm going to use products besides Power BI. So the star schema is in data lake. Any third-party product can use it. If I'm using Power BI, then I have the option, and I don't have other products that need that will access it. I'll do everything through Power BI. I can just create the star schema in a data set in Power BI. So you have options there. And this is where I sometimes spend a lot of time with customers. We whiteboard and figure out the best approach for their situation. You can also create SQL views in Synapse, and those could be used to minimize the tables needed. So if I go in there and I have 200 tables, I may have end users who are going to create reports, but they only really need maybe 20 of those tables. I can create a view in Synapse Serverless that points to just those 20 tables and does all the joining, and then make that view accessible to somebody who's using Power BI or any other tool. So you can then have a kind of a virtual layer on top of that common data model, database templates. And so a lot of times customers will create views like that. And then there's a lot to do with performance improvements, because if I have this huge table and a huge common data model with hundreds of tables in there, and there's a lot of data, I could have performance problems in there. So I can alleviate those performance problems by creating a star schema and using, say, import mode into Power BI. I also have other options within Power BI that you may not be aware of. They have composite models, aggregations. You can even copy the data to the dedicated pool if you're having some performance challenges. All right, so let's see if we have any questions. Victoria, is it in Fabric? Such a useful tool. That's what I said. Unfortunately, it's not there yet. Fabric is an awesome tool. Good agree on that. And then it seems like a data architect career. So a data architect, and I've been one for many years, could a lot of times, I wouldn't say they're so much the modeler, but they are helping to define whether we should use common data templates or not, and then the approach we're going to take from mapping that. And they'll have discussions, or should we use that wizard on top of it for the mapping, or should we use Spark? And many times it's a combination of that. You'll find they'll use the modeler for just about everything, but there may be certain features that you can only get through Spark to mapping it. So maybe they're going to do something interesting with combining the data with other things, and they need a certain library in Spark. And so for certain sources, they may use Spark, but maybe the majority will use the mapping data flow, the mapping option, map data option. All right, a couple other slides. Again, keep with the questions coming on there. A lot of times I get, well, how do I share the model between Synapse workspaces? Because Synapse workspaces are kind of isolated on their own. And I can have, instead of having one workspace that has one giant model, maybe I want to have workspaces that have pieces of the model. And you can do that, but then you'll need to keep those in sync with each other. Maybe you want to upgrade all the models, and I need a way to automate that, or maybe some models have the same entities, and if I need to update one of the entities, I want to do it in one fell swoop and not have to go on each one. Or maybe I want to copy some pieces of the model to another model in a different workspace. Well, you can do that. It's not super easy, I'll say. You can do that through Synapse Workspaces connected to GitHub. And so you can copy all the data out into from your model into GitHub and then access it through APIs, and then write some script that goes to each model through the APIs and updates that. So not the easiest thing to do. There are sample scripts that people have used this, but this is kind of a workaround for aligning models that are all in different workspaces in there. So there's the GitHub REST API, and then there's also this SysMS API that you can use as another option for accessing the common data models, the Synapse templates in there. So I want to point that out because that's a common question I get. And then lastly, if I want to use Power BI Desktop to connect to this database template, how can I do that? Well, there's a connector within Power BI called the Power BI Azure Synapse Analytics Workspace, which has been in beta forever. When you go into that, use that connector, you will see in this example, I have the retail. This is the common data model. And then I have also consumer goods one out there. And it'll expose all of those tables or entities that are underneath the covers. And then you just click on that. So when you use this workspace, it gets everything in there, including the common data models, the database templates in there. So this is pretty easy. I can just go in here and select the tables I want to use, and then start using them in Power BI to create my reports and reports and dashboards. All right, so resources out here. We'll make this deck available. There's a handful of resources out there. I blogged about it a little bit. So I use that to learn some more. A quick thing, I have a book coming out that talks about the common data model and also much more on that. So this gets into architecture when you look at modern data warehouse, data fabric, data lakehouse, data mesh. I talk about those, but I also start out understanding all the concepts. So it's really helpful if you're taking this approach, using the common data model. I'll cover a lot of that in the book. The first 5 chapters are out, and I expect 2 chapters a month. So if you're interested in this, if you have an O'Reilly subscription, you can go in and get access to it. If not, send me an email. I will send you the first 5 chapters in there. So there's my email. So if you have any questions about what I just talked about, happy to answer them. Just shoot them along.